My first 15-ish hours with Avowed felt like watching a swimmer just about to break through the surface of water, but never quite making it. You know that moment when they're right there, pushing against the tension, just a breath away from the air. That's Avowed. The game sits just below the water level, right at the edge of fun, and no matter how hard it tries, it never fully breaks through. And you can see something blurry there, a potential, but the game never reaches it. Even though the start feels okay and kind of fun, combat fundamentals are not bad, but hour by hour, Avowed just keeps you under, stuck below the fun line, holding you down, choking you little by little. Let's get into the details. Avowed is a first-person RPG set in World of Eora, the same universe as Pillars of Eternity. And you play as Envoy of Aedir, sent to Living Lands, a wild, untamed region filled with mysteries, ancient ruins, and strange magical plague spreading across the land. And right from the start, the setup feels kind of thin, distant, and as you start to get your bearings and familiarize yourself with the situation you're in, you start to see the problem. Learning about the Living Lands didn't feel exciting or natural, and the game is based on an existing IP, the Pillars of Eternity, of which I know nothing. So if you're a fan of those games, maybe you will find something interesting here. But for me, highlighted words with lore entry options for me to read were not appealing. In the first tutorial zone, you will experience some light combat and get a feeling of the NPCs and general gameplay loop. You traveled with Garrick and together you shipwrecked and will have the pleasure of getting insulted by Elora, a trapped thief whose fate you will decide. Already here I had a weird sensation when talking to the NPCs. My character doesn't talk, and Garrick would speak on my behalf, and I felt disconnected from my character and the situation we found ourselves in. The game opens up when you reach the city. With it you will get your first companion, Kai, who to his credit has some appeal and charm. And I want to emphasize that not everything is bad in the game. There are moments that made me giggle or was just satisfied with responses and moments during the gameplay and dialogue. When I went to check out my first shop, Kai had an interaction with a shopkeeper that felt interesting, giving some depth to the characters. It was a short qualler, yeah, but gave the world and Kai feeling of belonging here. Some of the choices had weight to them. I got shot by an assassin, and when I found and confronted him, he tried to sell me a story of seeing me in a dream, at which I groaned, not really a fan of those, and I was role-playing as a fair but stern inquisitor type of envoy, so I executed him. Soon after I strolled to the city, I was approached by a guy who warned me of my actions and said to look amongst the trees as I go out. I was confused at first, but soon I saw Garrick hanging from the tree with a reminder note, and that was really cool. It doesn't matter if Garrick had some side quest for me in the future or not, he was gone for good. Unfortunately, these moments were not frequent, and soon I started to lose interest in story and characters. Overall, delivery was just missing some flair and soul, and the voice that you encounter was weird and detracted from the whole experience. More and more I started to crave some combat exploration, and the game just lacks in the immersion department and presentation. So, the screen goes black for a second, and it feels like it's a time for an in-game cutscene, a transition. But the game just teleports you straight into a static dialogue. I would love to see a camera zoom out showing me the scenery, or a higher POV, or something more that gives life to the characters and to the scenery around me. Or for example, when I'm talking to Kai, I imagine if a random NPC passed by and said hello and he responded or something. These sudden transitions just feel awkward, and it's making me harder for it to get lost in the world. I really wanted to get immersed in the story and the characters, but there is just no substance here. And the delivery of the story, lore, and characters feels soulless and boring. It is just there and just continues to drop down in all departments, slowly but surely. And I really wonder what would game be if we got that darker feel that was teased in the first trailer we ever saw. And that lack of hook, story, and interesting characters made me turn towards the other aspects of the game quite sooner than I had expected. For a game set in untamed living lands, exploration feels surprisingly tame. There is a lot of barred doors, but they all have a back entrance or a window. The high places are easily reached and nothing feels too hidden from you. Even the low chiming sounds tell you if there is loot nearby. Yeah, you need to go and check if there is something up there, and it usually is, a chest or a something, remains of a camp or a lore entry. But there is never that exciting moment of discovery or awe, and you can hardly find it in loot too. And loot feels weird, I don't know else how to say it. There is plenty of it, alright, but it rarely amasses to anything worthwhile. And you need a lot of it if you're going to keep up with the level gating, but we'll get to that later in the combat section. So early on I found a unique pistol from one of the side quests and I just stuck with it. Even when I found a new one, my old one had already been upgraded and I didn't have the resources to invest in a new gun. So I mostly stuck to the same gear in my 15-ish hours. And that made one of the character progression pillars already checked. I got my gear, pistol, two-handed gun, armor and a spellbook early on, and I just kept upgrading them when I got the chance. Skill tree and abilities are also weird and lacking, and your companion's options even more so. I mainly spent my points in mage tree, but didn't use the wand as I liked the pistol and the musket, so I had to put some of the points into the ranger tree as well. The impact that leveling had on my character was minimal, as were my points into my attributes, which were mostly felt in dialogue options, even though they have boons for combat. And since the book was giving me a lot of spell options just by having it equipped, I had some extra points for free. Not sure how it goes if you play fighter or ranger. One thing that I did like is a moment with Kai where I had a feeling like we had bonded a little and he invited me to a training session. As the result of that was a permanent boost to 2 of my stats. That felt rewarding for my efforts into our friendship. Overall, exploration starts to feel thin pretty soon. There are definitely places to visit, especially when you see them in the distance and just decide to go for it. But ultimately, lack of meaningful things to find to better your gear, yourself or your companions quickly kills your enthusiasm for digging through the living lands. Combat though, it's the best part of the game, at least early on. Right from the start, the movement and weapons felt good. Then I got my first grimoire, and I kinda knew I will be playing a spellcaster. I just loved throwing spells at enemies. Animations felt clean and really enjoyed the feedback, and you get quite a few options right away, which felt generous. For a while I used bow and spells, and then I found a pistol. Here I have decided on my build. Pistol was slow and felt great to use. Lacked a bit in damage department with slower reload speed, but I didn't care. All was fine for a while as I explored the area of Dawnshore. Then I picked up some side quests, bounties in Paradise, and went hunting. My first bounty was a group of criminals called the Gold Sashes. So I approached their camp, assessed their numbers, and engaged. I got bodied so hard and so fast that I was stumped. I realized that the enemies were a higher tier than I was, and I'm like, okay, I need a better gear. And at that time I had a side quest to get a better gear, armor and a weapon. And I'm like, okay, let's solve this first and come back here later. But the problem was I had nowhere near enough resources for increasing the tier of my gear. And the tier 2 gear at the shop was about 3500 apiece, and I was barely carrying half of that. Gear needs few upgrades before it comes to the higher tier, and as you upgrade it, it does slightly better, but the overall nerf you're stuck with until your upgrade is still there takes a lot out of your DPS and defensive capabilities. It just felt bad. I was having fun till this point with the combat, but now I was just feeling stumped. I rarely do all the side quests in the game. I like to assess, especially in RPGs, if my character would be interested in a certain side quest. Like in Witcher 3, when you're looking for Yennefer and there is some sort of narrative time constraint. I like to roleplay that aspect of the game, and when an old lady on the side of the road asks me to go around and raise some statues, I will help her here and now, but I do not have time for this. The time is of the essence. And the requirement to go around and do side quests that I don't want to do so I could smoothen the gear curve is something I really dislike and really don't want to do. I don't do side content to earn the right to proceed, but the game must earn its right for me to care about its side content. But I was still having fun with the combat and exploration a little bit, and the area opened up, so I continue. I see an island and there is a bounty closer to the city. So maybe there is some tier 1 enemies and loot to ease my transition to the next one. So I go and check it out. But of course, I barely made it. My companions get down quite fast. The upper tier enemies take them down really quickly and I'm left alone with the boss and 2 ads that there are left. So I spend minutes, maybe 10, cheesing the boss around the big rock in the middle of the arena. I kill her and got a unique gun, and there was much rejoicing. The gun had a bit more damage and lightning effect, and I get excited. Pushed me a little bit on. So, I continued to play, found some gear and resources and managed to catch up to the enemy. I still had a Grimoire at tier 1, but mostly felt fine. I finish the first act and go to the next zone. So, the next zone. I follow the main quest, do a few side ones, do a little bit more exploration at the places that looked interesting or hiding something. I have done maybe like 2-3 upgrades overall on my whole equipment, and there's just minor upgrades working towards the 3rd tier, and I have already started to see enemies of the 3rd tier appearing more and more. And they are new type of enemy, having more HP and downing my allies even faster than before. And I'm thinking, I have my godlike power, the brutal stealth universal damage magic dagger. I'll stealth and rip like 70% of their health, right? Nope, even my super magical godlike power is level gated. This is the point where already boring, shallow game started to wear my patience. Unfortunately, nothing was pushing me forward anymore. I had no interest in the story or the characters. The world was pretty, sure, but there was nothing interesting to find. Not loot or interesting points of interest. No loot felt unique and you get stuck with whatever is the best tier. And the combat, the one thing that I found fun and engaging, was getting dragged down by these horrible jumps in difficulty without game giving me options to mitigate that. I really wanted to find something to like in this game, unfortunately. And to come back to my metaphor from the beginning, you can see some good things here. If each of the components of the game was slightly better, narrative and presentation bumped up with a little bit more personality, characters had a bit more interesting things to say, gear and loot had some imagination, and difficulty curve was smoothened out, I would possibly have finished the game. It wouldn't be a great game or a masterpiece, but a fun journey you could enjoy on its own terms. Alas, Avowed is not that. It is just sitting somewhere below the fun line and slowly getting more and more boring as the game goes on. And that's it. So if you enjoyed the video, click the things down below and leave a comment what do you think about the game, and as always, thank you for watching.